What's going on, YouTube? So I'm about an hour and a half out from completing my approximate 38-hour fast. So I simply go without eating, of course, right? Consuming all and every sort of calorie. That would include most salts, right? And obviously all sugar. So effectively, between the night prior till this morning, which equates to, a tad bit over a day and a half, by the hour, I've only consumed water and decaffeinated tea. So I had 2 cups of tea, one earlier in the day, one in the evening. I had jasmine green tea, and then in between that, I probably had 1 to 2 liters. I don't think I had more than 2 liters of water, right? So it may not sound like a lot. So in overall, including the tea, I probably only had 10 cups of water. And that's because I wasn't extremely active. Like I probably had 5,000 steps, and I did a 20-minute HIIT workout. So that could be moderately active. However, with fasting, there's a sense of liquid retention, or I guess maybe, pre-fasting, right? So like the night before, I gulp down water. I have tea most nights. So the night before, right, the last thing I had was like some tea and some butter cookies after my meal the night prior to my fast. So a lot of the liquid I consumed, which was much more prior to the day of fast, a lot of liquid I consumed goes into the next day for me. Usually, if that makes sense to you guys. So I'm not overly thirsty, even in a situation where I'm working out, being active. And just a side note, an FYI, if you guys do, tend to be overly thirsty, even though you're quenching electrolytes, and or just primarily water, that could be a sign of too much sugar in your blood, or, possibly, pre-diabetes, to be overly thirsty, just quote unquote. So obviously the measures of water, just depends on, your history of intake, and your activity level for that day, or even for the week, a couple days prior, Anyway, so fasting is very simple. The rules and regulations. Don't consume calories. Don't consume anything that's gonna spike insulin, that's gonna increase my blood pressure, that's gonna heighten my cholesterol, or that's gonna knock me out of ketosis. So what I like about fasting is it's free, right? I think what people are getting confused with, and there's exposures to this stuff, like the science is out in the open now, and it has been for like the last decade or so, right? Especially again with the internet, right? And things like YouTube and Facebook, right? Where a lot of these doctors and kinesiologists, people, and plant-based researchers and things of that nature, coaches, promote free or natural remediations to recovery and overall wellness, right? So it's been exposed for a while. So fasting is not a secret, but it is still a secret in a sense to where people are not ready or willingly able to take that sacrifice to just consume less, right? There's many levels to fasting, you know. There's many levels and there's many benefits. So why I like fasting is, one, it's a challenge for me. So I'm always up for challenges. Two, I don't have to rely on visiting my doctor solely to give me guidance or reassurance that I'm living the right way, right? I think the doctor, my point is, because I'm almost cutting myself off, so excuse me. My point is, when visiting a doctor at a hospital, I think those are secondary cases unless you have terminal illnesses and you need certain things to be advised on before you go and do, long-term things without taking medication, without, having a certain diet. I'm not saying don't go to the doctor, so don't think I'm saying that. It's just there are prevention methods, right? To where we're not having to break the bank with having to eat healthy or eat all the time, right? Like there's no methodology on you do this way with having a certain cadence and diet. When you think of healthy, at least before, 20, 30 years back, you think of low fat, low sugar, high protein, low to no carbs, depending on what you're doing with your body, trying to gain weight, trying to lose weight. You work out, you hydrate, you drink, be tentative on the alcohol, try to stay away from drugs. That's the overall basis of what healthy should look like, or the journey of being healthy should look like. But there's a lot of people who still do that and get cancer, right? Something extreme. Or there's a lot of people who still do that and still are predisposed to different flu-like illnesses. So it doesn't have to be extreme as cancer, right? But these are people who are my age. People who are a little bit younger than me are still getting exposed to these things where it was not common to get exposed to until you were in your 50s, 60s, and obviously 70s and up, right? Because you're older, you're aging. But unless you go to a natural home remedy-based doctor and stuff like that, right? A lot of them not going to really promote fasting. They'll mention come fasted when it's time for blood work and stuff. But I remember one of my last times going to the doctor, she was like, yeah, eat beef or steak no more than two to three times a week. And I'm not against anybody who does that, right? But if you're talking about processed or whether it's well done cooked or whatever meat, especially if it's manufactured, prepared in the United States, especially, and you're telling the African American male who has history with who has parental history with diabetes and high blood pressure to eat something like that, or to maintain a cadence, or to say nothing is wrong with it without without being open-ended to both sides, right? That's interesting to me. And that's only one doctor out of the million doctors in the United States. I'm not saying all doctors are like that. Don't get me wrong. My approach is just simply as the body is a machine, man. What you put in is what you get out. And obviously, around studies, yes, fasting is almost the best measure of rejuvenating your body. It's almost the best measure of regenerating those brain cells, regenerating those blood cells, right? Getting those white blood cells, active, what I'm saying? Getting that blood pressure down, getting that blood circulating your body better, right? Of course, a lot of people will fast because it loses weight, and I've passed that, During this 36 plus hour fast, I think I've lost maybe 4 pounds, but 2 to 3 pounds is water weight, right? Maybe a pound of fat if I'm lucky. So I don't do it to lose weight, but it's a great way to maintain weight, right? Overall maintenance if you're fasting long term, right? Not long term essentially as an amount of days or hours, but long term with consistency over months or years, decades of fasting, prolonged fasting, right? Fasting for more than 18 to 24 hours, right? Fasting to get to that peak, like fasting get to that peak autophagy level. And, autophagy is big. So fasting is very, 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 very available to do, but less is more, right? Eat less. Fasting is just eating less. It's consuming less, right? And you get down to the nitty and gritty of the minerals and the vitamins and the calories, saturation levels and all that. But it's simple. You eat less. You go with a restricted or prolonged time of not eating calories. And so I normally fast, and I know many people do. So it's not really a mystic type of program, right? But most of us, if we're getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, right? Some people are lucky enough or younger to where they get 9 to 10 hours of sleep. That's almost half of the day. Let's say it's a third of the day. Your body's not eating, obviously. And you're in a metabolic / ketosis rate. You reach ketosis around that 6 to 8 hour time frame post eating. So most people who have decent sleep are in a ketosis status, right? So what's good about fasting is its levels. So most people would fast on average, and you could do this daily, right? Including sleep, waking up, preparing for the day. 12 to 16 hours or 12 to 18 hours of fasting is very, very securing, right? It's a lot of traffic. 12 to 18 hours is a normal fast, right? You see some, metabolic rate is heightened, it's heightened, and right, you're not fully into autophagy yet, but mental clarity starts to kind of peak when you get closer to those 18, those 20 hours. But you're definitely in a fasted state where if you're doing that consistently, right, every day or every other day, you start seeing prolonged results of weight maintenance or weight loss, depending on how many calories you've gone into deficiency with, and things of that nature. But why I like to do a prolonged fast of anywhere from 36 to 40 hours, right, every few months, is to rejuvenate, is to get into autophagy, is to stay into ketosis over time. And I also like to be active and work out and sweat to force a sustained metabolic rate. But there's anti-aging that happens when you're into autophagy. There's brain development that happens when you're in autophagy, right? You know how when you drink alcohol, right? It kind of kills brain cells, right? And you can go into studying exactly what happens when you're drinking. But autophagy does something different. When you're not consuming anything, obviously, including alcohol, right? You regenerate brain cells, right? You get rid of mental fog. There's a sense of mental clarity that happens when you fast. There's a sense of energy boost when you fast. When you're reaching the levels of prolonged fasting, 24 plus hours, right? Getting to 36, 40. Some people fast even 60 to 72 hours. There's that HGH, human growth hormone boost that happens. And you get a lot of, HGH when you're lifting weights, especially lower body resistance, squatting, powerlifting, and stuff like that. And I've also researched and heard that people take HGH injection shots, which cost thousands of dollars, to where if you just fast for a prolonged state, you do it consistently, along with securing an active lifestyle with some resistance training, with some HIIT, with some lower body, plyometric movements, HGH naturally increases. It's the same with protein development. People think you have to take all this protein when there's natural proteins in your body. So it's simple stuff. Your body is a self-servant, self-sufficient machine. And it's all about activation, maintenance, and restriction. So I just completed, or like I said, I'm about an hour away from doing about 38-hour fast. I do this probably every 16 to 20 weeks. On average, I fast anywhere from 12 to 14 hours every day. And then so this just takes it another level, between 2 days or a day and a half of not eating, just so I don't have to play catch up when I enter my 40s. I don't have to play catch up when I enter my 50s. I'm trying to learn and establish a cadence to understanding my body, listening to my body, right? Especially knowing that there's certain things that run in my history. Thankfully, I don't have cancer that runs, in my family's history. But you can bring on things when you're not, careful. Like, you are what you eat, right? So I want to promote better gut health. I want to have less bloating, right? For just regular day-to-day, health, right? Feeling, you know. So there's a lot of good things with prolonged fasting. And I've been fasting, since a kid, or I guess a teenager. And it started from a religious base, believe it or not, so I now take it, and I understand that fasting definitely promotes a lifestyle, or a clarity of lifestyle, right? This is something I do to promote health and wellness. And I don't have to come out of my pocket to do it. I don't have to go see a physician or a doctor to start or to make sure I'm doing something right, when this is the naturalness of the body, right? Going to the doctor, getting your checkup, right? Prostate check, colonoscopy, that's all well and great, and that should happen because these are measures that you take. But when you go home, it's just like school. It's just like doing any sort of program, where you then go home and you're not by yourself, and then you have to apply those actions. Because you could go to the doctor all the time, and if you're not doing the right things at home, not having the right diet, right activity, all that's out the window. So fasting is big for me. Fasting has always been a way to just reset myself. And as I get older, I want to increase that. So, I want to get into more 48 to 72 hour fasting, probably every other month or every 2 to 3 months. Prolong my fastings daily, to only give me a 6 to 8 hour window. So I want to prolong this and just be able to, spread that consciousness of what fasting is actually doing for your body and how great it is. So yeah, completing almost at 30 hours of no food. I just finished a HIIT workout. I was just taking out the trash. I like to get my steps in, started early in the morning. And so about to pick up some water and eggs, about to eat some chicken rice with some eggs, get some blueberries in, drink some tea. And yeah, until next time.